Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Cheryl Williams. I'm the chairman of the board for the Darien Chamber of Commerce. So thank you to the library this morning for hosting this. And just a reminder to everybody, we do have our Darien indoor winter sales going on this week. So be sure to stop by your local merchant and pick up, some great sale items. Also, we have our townwide gift certificates that are available to purchase at DR Bank. So be sure to go ahead and pick those up for yourself or for gifts. We will be launching a digital platform later this year, so look out for that. That's really exciting. With that, I would like to introduce our first selectman, Jayme Stevenson. We're very lucky to have her here this morning, and her bipartisan leadership this year has been tremendous in keeping our community together. So we're really pleased to have her here. There will be a short Q&A at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, just feel free to enter them in the comments on the side, and we will get to them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl and Misako. I want to first raise my Nero glass to all of you. I hope you grabbed some breakfast or a coffee this morning from one of our wonderful businesses downtown. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm sorry we can't meet in person, but we were talking about one of the great things, and to be sure, there have been many silver linings throughout this last year. I'm going to talk about a few in a little while. But one of them is that these Zoom calls, a lot of people can participate. So we're seeing that in town government too, where more people are tuning in and paying attention and really engaging in things that affect them, their families, and the community. So I think that's a real positive. I also want to say thank you, not only to the Darien Chamber for the incredible work that they've done to support the community at large and all of the town businesses, but the businesses, and I know many business owners and property owners are on the call this morning. You guys have worked so hard to keep our businesses afloat through the pandemic. It's been really heartwarming to see. I know it's been super hard for all of you, but I feel that we're seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. And the town of Darien, all in all, has fared very well through this pandemic, only through the hard work of all of you and the dedication that you have to your businesses in our community. So again, cheers to you. Thank you very much. I hope everyone is well. I hope you're healthy. I know it's been a struggle. I've actually had 2 people in my family, 2 of my kids, believe it or not, who got COVID, one of them pretty bad. So I know firsthand how challenging that can be for your family. So I'm wishing all of you well, and hopefully you're safe and healthy. And thank you for wearing your masks and for distancing when you're out in public and shopping in our shops. It really makes a difference to keep our community safe. I also want to say a big shout out to Christine Sullivan from the SBA. She was invaluable to us last summer. Maybe she still is to some of you as we work through some of the state and federal financial assistance programs that might be available to you. We're in phase 2 of the PPP program. I know some of you are applying. There has been a $5,000 grant program that's been available. Some of you have been taking advantage of that, which is great. And the town of Darien was also enabled for a second time to accept applications to defer property taxes for 2 months. So applications are still being accepted until February 1st. You can find that information online at the tax collectors section of the town website. And that gives you just a little bit of breathing room on your taxes this year. So there's really no prerequisite other than to, for businesses and landlords, you have to prove that you've had a financial hardship, but otherwise it's a pretty easy application. Today, I'd like to be a conversation, even though we're in a virtual world. I haven't had an opportunity to see some of you during the pandemic because we've all been trying to stay safe. So I'm very much looking forward to hearing from you. So we want to leave some time at the end of my comments so that you can ask me questions, or I can just get some feedback from you on how else the town might be able to help you. So I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. It's been quite a year. Hopefully a once in a lifetime global pandemic. I don't think any of us want to live through one of these again. We've certainly learned a lot about how best to handle something of this nature. It's been very valuable for me as a town leader. We practice all of these things. We have tabletop exercises all the time to respond to things like virus outbreaks. But there's nothing like the real thing to show you where your gaps are and where we can do better as a town government and a community. So we've learned a lot, we've adjusted along the way, and I have to really give a shout out to my Town of Darien team of employees. We haven't stopped working. I've been in the office every day since March 12th, as have most of my staff. So we know that the wheels of government have to keep turning for you, and therefore we've been here for you. But along with that global pandemic, we had protests this summer, several of them thankfully peacefully here in Darien, racial unrest across the country, two very damaging storms. There's been a presidential declaration for Storm Isaias. So communities have been able to file for some FEMA funding for any damages that they've incurred. And then we had probably the most divisive presidential election of my lifetime. So any one of those would be a challenge, but all of them together has been quite extraordinary. And I do believe, I tell my kids all the time, you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and we are stronger as a community, to be sure. I've seen firsthand the work that you've done. There were some incredible programs. I do have to call out the Corbin Cares program this morning. A wonderful collaboration between our awesome David Genovese and the Darien Foundation and our local restaurants, a win-win for everybody. Meals were provided to the most vulnerable in our community, our seniors, and now our teachers and town employees as a thank you for all of their hard work, while at the same time we're keeping our restaurants in operation. So I think that's a model, and I really take my hat off to all of the people and the generous donors to the Corbin Cares program. I'm sure that's a model that many will follow in the future. I recently heard that the state of Connecticut will be receiving $1 billion from the federal government, which is wonderful to hear that we're going to get some relief. About 3/4 of that will be dedicated to our schools, who certainly have been hurt through the pandemic. Very difficult situation for our students in underserved communities who have very limited access to remote learning. So I think this money is going to be well spent to make sure that educational equity is a priority for Connecticut communities. And another $250 million is going to be dedicated to efforts for affordable housing. Several surveys have been done over the past year, and affordability has floated to the top as one of the biggest issues here in the state of Connecticut. I know I'm not, we all understand that living here in southwestern Connecticut, it's very expensive to live here. Properties are expensive. And there's going to be a great push this year in the legislature to find ways to make Connecticut more affordable for everyone. I'm going to stop for a minute and go back and talk a little bit about COVID, just so you know where we are as a community. In general, we've done very well as a community mitigating the virus here. You know, we have a population of 22,000 people. And to date, we've had just a little over 970 cases in aggregate since the beginning of March, from 650 households, which tells you that household spread and small gatherings have really been the places of transmission for the virus. The virus is not spreading in schools. We've not seen the virus spreading in our small businesses and our restaurants. Of course, we've had a couple issues here and there with maybe spread amongst employees, but I think that's to be expected, you know, when you work in tight quarters. We've had 27 hospitalizations to date, and sadly, 8 people in our community died with COVID. And I say it that way because it hasn't been determined that those 8 deaths are as a result of COVID. Those folks died with COVID in their system. So everybody, as you know, who enters the hospital gets tested. And then if you pass away, they test you post-mortem. So some of those people had other underlying conditions that were really the primary cause of why they died, but COVID perhaps has exacerbated that. We started with the pandemic, as you know, the second week of March. Schools closed on March 12th. The spring transmission of the virus peaked in the second week of March. We had about 48 cases, which was pretty scary for our community. From May to October, we really had a kind of a nice reprieve from a spike in cases, but then post-Halloween, the virus came on with a vengeance. And we also saw the introduction of the more highly transmissible virus from the UK and South Africa. So the peak transmission was the first week of January, where we saw 91 cases in that first week. While the age group of 50 to 59 is still the most highly impacted age group, early on we were very concerned, rightfully so, about protecting people in our congregate care, long-term care facilities. What we're seeing in this second half of the pandemic since October are ages infant to 49 are more significantly impacted. So the good news in that is I think that we've done a great job of learning how to protect the elderly and vulnerable in our community. And also the good news is that younger people tend to have less severe outcomes from the virus. Statewide, the positivity rate.
Anybody that, give anybody.
I think I hear someone. Statewide, the positivity rate is 3.67%, which is declining. That's very good. Overall, hospitalizations and deaths statewide are declining. And as of today, over 300,000 vaccines have been administered statewide. The first phase of the vaccine, I'll talk about that a little bit. First phase of the vaccine, phase 1A, was for frontline healthcare workers, medical first responders, and folks in congregate care settings, the elderly. We are now in phase 1B, and phase 1B is going to be tiered. The first tier is focusing on folks 75 and over. And until those folks are all vaccinated, they won't move on to the rest of the population in phase 1B, which will be critical workforce, yet to be fully defined, frontline essential workers, and then folks 64 to 74 will also be eligible in phase 1B. We don't anticipate phase 1B opening up until sometime in late February. The problem is vaccine supply. Connecticut is receiving vaccine from both Pfizer and Moderna. The state receives 46,900 doses of vaccine every week from the federal government. If you aggregate the number of people in phase 1B that are eligible to be vaccinated, it's 1.3 million people. So if you do some simple math, it's going to take about 27 weeks to vaccinate everyone in phase 1B. I know that there's an allocations committee that the governor has convened that's making these allocation decisions. I think they have some tough work coming up, quite frankly, because I read an interesting article in the Connecticut Mirror yesterday that says while the tiered system will allow folks 65 and up to be vaccinated next, people of color who are 55 and over have the same vulnerability as folks who are white and older. So there's an equity problem with the way the state's tiered system is currently designed. And I hope that the state will make adjustments to that so that they're truly prioritizing vaccines for the most vulnerable among us. We've held 3 vaccine clinics here in Town Hall for folks 75 and over, running very smoothly. We've administered over 400 vaccines. Yesterday, we vaccinated someone who was 102. That was incredible. And boy, we should be so lucky. She was a wonderful, wonderful woman. So that feels really good to be helping people know that they're going to be safe from this crazy virus. The way you register for vaccines, and all of this information is on the town website. There's a system called the Vaccine Management System, or how we say it, VAMS. It's a little bit clunky. The CDC is working on making improvements to that system. But when it's your turn to get vaccinated, you can call the Darien Health Department. They'll help you. Or you can call 211. There's people ready to assist you in the registration process to get a vaccine. And if anybody has individual questions about when you might be eligible for a vaccine, don't hesitate to call our Darien Health and Human Service Department. They'll be happy to help you. So with every challenge comes silver linings. And there have been many, to be sure. And I'll just name a few. We've certainly had the opportunity to have abundant family time. I know for many of us that live here in southwestern Connecticut and typically commute to New York, finding that downtime to spend with your family is always a challenge. Everybody's busy schedules with sports and activities. And we got a forced break from all that. And I think by and large, that's been a very good thing. On the negative flip side of that, we are seeing an increase in incidents of domestic violence in our community. And you know, we know that having kids in school really helps to identify domestic violence situations. And the kids haven't been in school. So we are hoping that that's changing. There's a plan in place right now where the district is going to, elementary schools are back in person and have been for some time, but the middle school and high school kids are going to be brought back on a schedule and back in full by March 1st. So I think all in all, that's a very good thing. We're finding that younger people are really struggling with the isolation and the lack of socialization with their peers. So we're working hard to keep a close eye on the mental well-being of our community members, particularly our youngest community members. Folks have rediscovered the outdoors, which is amazing. We've always been a community who loves our beaches and parks, but to see folks out taking walks all the time and really enjoying nature is wonderful. And it sort of gives me a lot of ideas on how the town should focus our budget dollars on ways to really continue to enhance community services and outdoor recreational services. I think that's one thing that is so special about the town of Darien. And we're certainly seeing a welcome shift in our real estate market. People who don't want to live in those congested urban areas where the spread of the virus has been significant are seeing the benefits of moving to beautiful communities like Darien and others in southwestern Connecticut. So our real estate market has taken a very positive bump. I know that's going to be great for all of you business owners. And it's so well timed because we have all of our redevelopment projects that are, most of them are underway. And people are seeing there's a real buzz about the town of Darien. I've spoken to a couple local developers this week, and there's tremendous interest for people to buy houses here in Darien, to open new businesses here in Darien. So the pandemic has really created, in a really good way, a perfect environment for the town of Darien to flourish. So I think that's a real highlight. I think we have a little bit of a slower pace right now in Darien, which is great too. Good for our souls, I think. We have strengthened our community collaborations, necessarily so, and that's been very positive. Working with all of our local nonprofits. I work directly on a weekly basis with my colleagues across the region and across the state. We talk every week about COVID response and share best practices, so that's been a very positive thing. And we have been forced in a good way to move a lot of our town services online. Technology has certainly been our friend, and we're looking forward to expand those services going forward. And timely and effective communication. We've learned full well how important that is in times of crisis. There's always more work that we can do in that regard. We'll be making some changes and some recommendations in our budget process about communication from the town. Hopefully you all get my Code Red messages every Thursday. There'll be one coming out tonight. If you're not signed up for those, you can go to the town website. In the red banner at the top, there's a link to sign up for Code Red. You'll get a voice message. You'll also get it via email. And I try to tell you only what you need to know. I don't want to overburden you. There's so much information out there. But we do find that that's a useful tool to try and reach everyone. So I touched briefly on our local developments, and I know some of our developers are on this call today. So exciting. The Corbin project is moving forward, and that is really wonderful. I think you're going to see lots of action coming soon. The drainage project was first, and I know that David is ready to go. If you've driven by Federal Realty in Norotan Heights, they're starting to frame, and the new Walgreens should be open this spring, which is really wonderful. I got some good news that the Palmer redevelopment will hopefully be underway within the next 6 months. The redevelopment of the Darien Playhouse, 1077 Post Road, is well underway, and I think the commercial tenants are hoping to be in place also by this spring. So we are so fortunate. We're one of the towns, one of the only towns in Connecticut, southwestern Connecticut anyway, that is really expanding, growing, lots of excitement about what's happening here in Darien. So can't wait for more of that. Everything should be wrapped up by 2023. I know that seems like a long way ago, a long way away, but it's going to be here before you know it. I'd like to spend a moment to talk a little bit about some legislative highlights this year. I'll start with the positive. The governor has a great focus to expand broadband access here in Connecticut. As I mentioned, we've seen that our new work and learn from home environment has shown some gaps in broadband and internet service. So I'm very pleased that that's going to be a focus. I think they're first going to focus on underserved communities, but even here in Darien, because there are a limited number of providers and they largely have a monopoly in the marketplace, service really isn't where it needs to be. But if any of you are having business issues with your internet connectivity, please call me, because I have a great relationship with our utility liaisons, and I would be very happy to raise your concerns with them directly. There's a couple of startling proposals that have already been issued in Hartford. We're in the process right now where bills are being introduced. Everything in the legislative session this year is virtual. So they're not having public hearings per se, but you can sign up to give testimony virtually. One of the more concerning to me proposals is a proposal for a statewide real property tax. Property taxes have always been local up to this point, and Senator Martin Looney has proposed a 1 mil statewide tax. And also an increase in capital gains tax on the wealthy. I don't need to tell you that all of that will be negative for the town of Darien. There was a great article, and I did push it out on my social media, but I'll push it out again and I'll send it to Cheryl after this meeting, showing exactly the financial impacts to the 10 most impacted towns in Connecticut. Darien's number 5. I think the additional tax burden for us will be over $5 million if this goes through. And it's something that we will be mindful of as we go through the town budget process, which is happening right now, that we need to look all in at what the tax burden is on our residents and our businesses as we make our decisions about what services we can continue to provide and what we might need to pare back on. State's probably going to legalize online sports betting, likely going to legalize non-medicinal marijuana, otherwise known as recreational marijuana. I don't like to call it that because I don't think using drugs should ever be considered recreational, but that will likely pass this year. And something that will be of great interest, some positives and negatives from this, is the state taking control of some local zoning decisions. Specifically, there will be legislation to mandate an increase in housing density around transit hubs, i.e. the Darien train station, the Norotan Heights train station, and commercial corridors, the downtown of Darien. And what they're proposing is that multifamily housing should be allowed to be built as of right, which means no public hearings, within a quarter mile of commercial districts and a half mile of transit hubs. So they're looking to increase the density of what they call middle housing, which is 2 to 4 family housing. They'd like to have those applications be as of right. I think that can work in some areas of the town of Darien. I'm looking forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission having some discussions about where those proposals can work well. I think there's places in Darien where proposals like that will be very challenging, where we know we already have problems with traffic flow and functioning of intersections, for example. Along with this proposal is going to come an elimination of minimum parking requirements. So should it go through, you might see an expansion of on-street parking because there won't be anywhere else for people to park. So I'm happy to say in one way that I've been on a task force with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, working on this proposal with Sarah Bronin, the wife of Mayor Luke Bronin from the city of Hartford, she's the proposer of this legislation. So I've been working in a small work group to help modify this proposal in a way that would be more digestible for small towns like Darien. The risk for us is that we become a more urbanized environment. And I don't think that that's why people move here. I don't think that's why small businesses want to open here. So trying to strike the right balance between more dense development and what is appropriate for a suburban community like the town of Darien. Those are some of the broad brush highlights from the state of Connecticut. I've touched on a number of things. Someone had entered a question earlier on some of the infrastructure improvements that might be going along with the Federal Realty project. And I'm happy to share with you that that development has already included a drainage detention system underneath the parking areas and the Walgreens building that holds 1 million gallons of rainwater. For those of you that have been around a long time, you remember the floods of 2007, where the commercial areas on Heights Road were severely damaged. And lots of town discussions since then about how to rectify that problem. At one point, there was a proposal to send all that water down to Baker Park and turn Baker Park into a detention basin. That's when I joined the Board of Selectmen, and we set that project aside. And instead, we worked with the developers, with Federal Realty, and at their expense, they installed this detention system underneath their development, which should go a long way to mitigate the flooding on Heights Road. The Palmer development will also be doing some flood mitigation, and the town of Darien will be doing some flood mitigation in the commuter parking lot. The federal project will be installing sidewalks along Heights Road, along West Avenue, along Norotan Avenue. There's a roadway expansion project that's happening right now at the corner of Heights and Norotan. New signals will be installed at West Avenue and Norotan, and a couple of new crosswalks for pedestrian safety will be installed along with that project. And the last thing that I want to mention that we've been working on for the last year is a redevelopment proposal for the Norotan Heights train station. That building certainly has outlived its useful life. We have a beautiful plan that we unveiled to the folks at Federal and Palmer this week, and we're looking to get Connecticut DOT support for the redevelopment of that train station, a new pedestrian overpass that will really bring together the train station itself with the developments across the street. So that's going to be a few years in the offing. Meanwhile, the Connecticut DOT has determined that they need to replace the platforms at the Darien train station. For me, I feel like they just renovated that station not long ago, but they never upgraded the platforms, which they're going to do over the next year and a half. And along with that, the town of Darien is going to enter into a partnership with them, and we're going to add some more commuter shelters along the platform so people can protect themselves from the elements. So that will be positive, a little bit of upheaval as they're doing that platform project, but all in all, it will be great for commuters in the end. Hopefully we'll see a return to commuting. Commutation is down almost 90% across the Metro North system. But I think it will come back. It'll come back slowly. I don't think it's going to come back in its entirety. I think people are now enjoying a bit of work from home time. It's better quality of life by and large for most people. So I think we'll see a slow return to that. So with that, I will stop and I will see if you have any comments or questions for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jayme. You've addressed most of the questions that have come through. One is interesting though, with our tax base increasing due to the construction going on throughout town, do you anticipate that our property taxes will stay the same or even decrease?
Adding to our commercial tax base is a great benefit for the town of Darien, so that a bit of the tax burden should be able to shift in the next 5 years to that commercial tax base. I'm very reluctant to say that local taxes will ever go down, and I'll explain why. I did prioritize last year, made a big point of making sure that the Board of Selectmen had a 0 mill rate increase last year because we knew the problems that were on the horizon with the pandemic. The problem, it's, you know, as you all know, the cost of doing business never stays the same. And with town government and the unionized environment that we work in, we have 3 unions on the town side, and I believe they have 6 unions on the Board of Ed side. They have built into their contracts contractual increases for personnel. So when you look at my budget, for example, there's probably about 75 to 80% of the Board of Selectmen budget that is contractually driven. So that's the hard job that we have every year, is to make sure that we are providing the services that our residents and our business owners come to expect, but to always be looking at ways to do that more efficiently with less cost. There's been a lot of conversation over the last couple of years about the idea of whether regionalizing certain services would be a cost savings to communities like ours. And I always have conversations with my colleagues in the region about things that we could share that would make more sense. But I will tell you that even regionalizing services doesn't always result in a cost savings. You might deliver the service in a more efficient way, which is great too. But I am very mindful of that. I think that's one reason why it's super important to make sure that the leaders of our town are fiscally conservative. So they're always looking out for the best interest of our taxpayers. And then again, pushing back on the state mandates that always seem to fall to wealthier communities like ours. The idea up in Hartford is that we should and can always pay more. So, you know, I've made it my mission to push back on that on your behalf. And I work very hard to really minimize budget increases. I can't speak for the Board of Education. As we know, our schools are one of the reasons why people want to move here. We highly value high quality public education, and that does come at a cost.
Thank you. So while we're on the topic of taxes and town spending, a question came in: why did the town choose to update the train stations when there's very little commuting and reports are talking about it, you know, never going back to normal?
Sure. So the town is not doing those upgrades. Metro North and Condot, it's in their long range transportation plan to make the upgrades. The reason why they're doing the platforms at the Darien station is safety. And you'll recall that they recently finished a project at Norotan Heights. They replaced all the platforms there too. That was also a big safety issue. Not to get into too much granular detail, but new platforms now have a wide tactile warning strip right before you get to the tracks. Those two platforms didn't have some of those basic safety measures. They weren't ADA compliant. The only piece of the Darien train station project that we are participating in is contributing the shelters, the little, they look like little bus shelters that people can get in out of the weather. Otherwise, DOT will not be installing those. We think that's a great amenity for our commuters. And we have a reserve fund that's been funded by commuter parking payments. We have to use that money to reinvest in our train station amenities. So it will not be a tax burden on the community. The money's already there. We're just going to spend it in that way.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the $5,000 grant for businesses. The question is that for the town of Darien? Can you explain a little bit further?
That is a pot of money from the state of Connecticut, and Misako or Cheryl, you might know the exact agency that can help with that. That is not a town of Darien grant fund. I've talked briefly with the Board of Finance chair about whether the town should form a grant fund of a similar nature. Some towns have done that. It's really getting the Board of Finance to buy in and to have an application process. I will continue that dialogue if I can get some more feedback on if that would be a worthwhile local program.
And this is a tough question. Any updates on the 7-Eleven Duchess property?
The only update I have is that very difficult deliberations, I'm sure, for the Planning and Zoning Commission. There's been virtually no positive feedback from the community about a 7-Eleven taking the place of Duchess. I think what's really important for me to communicate here today is that a lack of public desire is not a legal reason for the Planning and Zoning Commission to deny an application. I know many of you know that. There are things that the Planning and Zoning Commission can do to modify, to require that modifications are made. They could certainly deny the application. Likely that would result in a court case, but that is possible. But there are only certain things that a Planning and Zoning Commission can use to deny an application. Public health and safety is one of them, so I know there are some safety concerns. There's certainly some traffic concerns. So I think we're all going to be very eager to see where that goes. I don't think it's going to be decided anytime soon. I think if the commission does deny that application, it will likely end up in court.
Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. It's always nice to see you and hear from you. And if there are no other questions, I guess we can close this out.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm always available if there's something anyone wants to talk with me about privately, or you have questions after we log off, don't hesitate to contact me. We're here to help.
Great, as are we as the Chamber of Commerce. So thank you for your time.
Thanks.